All right, here we go, setting off from the house. Trying out a new chest rig today instead of my head rig, so we'll see how it does. You can see leaves are already starting to fall. This house here was, I guess, a bank repossession a few years ago. And a really nice couple and their son moved in here and started redoing it. They made quite a bit of work in the last year. Quite a bit of progress on it. And fabrication, welding. Just about the only business here in Worcester. People laying in wood for the winter, because around here there's still a lot of wood-fired stoves, coal stoves, used for heating. You can see the mountains off in the distance there. I mean, this whole village is pretty much in a valley here. I'll show you once this car goes by. Yeah, you can see those guys. Up there's the mountains behind my house. More mountains off in the distance. None of them are huge. I think just a couple of thousand feet at the very most. But the whole state is like this. I think I once read somewhere that if they took Vermont and flattened it out, unwrinkled all the mountains, it would be one of the 10 largest states. But as it is fairly tiny. I mean, you can drive across the entire state, east to west, in, I don't know, hour and a half maybe, 2 hours at the most. It's a little bit longer than it is wide, but still, it doesn't take very long. Are you? There you are, okay. So it's just, this is it. The main drag of Worcester. The center and highlight of the town. Village. It might get a little bit loud because the wind's picking up. Normally, the wind comes from the west, but with the hurricane coming up, we're getting a front pushing in from the south down here. It's actually a beautiful day today. For once, the humidity's cleared off. It's, I don't know, 34, 35 degrees maybe. Celsius, of course. It's about 85 Fahrenheit. But without the humidity, it is a beautiful, bright, sunny day. And for once, it doesn't feel like you're breathing through a wet towel or blanket. Town of Worcester Volunteer Fire Department. And next to it, the county clerk office. Huge administration here in Worcester. I think 2 people run it. Sorry, I wasn't talking because I didn't know how well I could be heard over the lawnmower. It's going to get loud here again in a second. Here we go, yellow building. That is the Worcester Post Office. Can see it on the mailbox here, POC, Post Office Central. With a cafe behind it. A lot of construction going on, people getting ready for the winter. Every Thursday, they do a community thing here. Food, music, village store. There's a good shot of the mountains. Plenty of houses up there. They're almost ridiculously hard to get to in the winter, though. Most of the roads around here are 100, 150, 200 years old. So they tend to be windy little country roads. So yeah, this is pretty much the village of Worcester. It's a nice little place. People are generally friendly. At least in as much as when I see people out in their front yards, I'll stop and talk to them. It is incredibly loud today. And I don't know how well the wind is going to do on my camera. I guess we'll have to wait and see when we get back, won't we? Talk about an old barn. I think it's probably 100, 150 years old. You can see the side of it here. There's a nice tumble down. You can even see some of the trees starting to change up on the mountain. Got some red out there, more there. I'm actually surprised that the color's held on as long as it has. But the green was late coming this year. We didn't even get buds on the trees until the end of June. And there was still snow on the ground through May. So yeah, it's usually snowy here about 6 months out of the year. Like I said, Lake Champlain, I think, has to do with that. Get all the moisture and the cold air coming off the water, just blowing across the state, especially because it's to the west of us there. And there's nothing but this series of valleys and mountains that kind of channel all of that cold air. So it is not unusual for it to be, 5, 10 degrees below zero and snowing here, and then be right at freezing up in Montpelier. Well, Celsius, of course. A lot of different styles on the homes here, because the village has been built up, rebuilt up, never really grown, but sometimes plots will break down, and what used to be one big plot of land is now two, and so a new house goes up, or old house falls down, which happens occasionally under the snow. So I think you can see this is why this is one of my favorite things to do. Just come out here and walk. It's pretty country. And once we get up to the edge of the village up here, there's a river that runs by it. Some years it's really good fishing, other years not so much. I'm also wearing my backpack because of course I am. I mean, Not only do I have my knife and gloves on me all the time and my ferro steel, but in my backpack, I've got shelter in the form of a couple of lightweight tarps and a few other things besides. I tend to take it everywhere I go, just in case. It all started growing up in Oklahoma. I mean, out there, because places are so apart from each other, and you can easily walk 20, 25 miles and not see a living soul. You always learn to carry shelter, carry shade in your car, carry water, just in case you broke down and you didn't see anybody for a few hours or a day or so. Especially if you're traveling the farm roads in the backcountry. On a day when it's 40, 45 degrees and the only house you can see is a good 15, 20 miles away, sometimes that bottle of water can save your life. And it just kind of snowballed from there over the course of my life. Always be prepared, as the Boy Scouts say. I was a Cub Scout for a little bit when I was 7, 8 years old, maybe. I didn't particularly care for it. Well, then, when ooh, the wind's really picking up now. You can see the flag over there in the distance. We'll go around the bend up here and then turn around and I'll show you the other side, which is even less spectacular. Morning dove. Surprising amount of cars today. I don't normally see this many. Look at that view, though. I've hiked all up through there. I got some dandelions left. Every part of a dandelion is edible. You can eat the flowers, you can eat the greens. If you dig up the roots, you can boil them up in water and they make a pretty good tea. Yeah, so this is it. It peters out after a few more houses, but I think I'm going to turn around here. Once this car passes, I'm going to cross over the road and do that. Here we go. Now we're coming back into Worcester. This is the way I come home from work every day. Metal of some kind. Interesting. There's a camper for sale. One of my friends from work, Kim, she's waiting for her kids to grow up and move out. They're 13 and 11, I think. Because her dream is for her and her husband to take their camper and just go. It's funny because they're both gamers. She is really big into EverQuest, and he has apparently gotten extremely deep into EVE Online. But the both of them are also extremely avid outdoors people. And Kim said that their dream is to go from campground to campground, see the world. Well, see America, at least, wherever they can drive to. They're both kind of handy as well, make little things to sell, have some money socked away just in case they need it, and just live a rambling life, away from people, out in nature. Bringing all the creature comforts along with them as they go in their camper. Spending days out on the lakes, in the woods, nights around a campfire. Throw in some satellite internet, and there you go. It's the best of all worlds. You get to play your games and be connected, while at the same time being completely away from everybody. That actually doesn't sound like a bad life to me at all. And once upon a time, when I was down there living in Virginia, I was looking at forestry service jobs. at George Washington National Park. And what they do is they have ranger positions there where you are responsible for a section of the woodland, you know, collecting camping fares and stuff. Most campgrounds there have honesty boxes. You know, the rate is usually a couple of bucks a night, no more than $5. And people just, you know, drop cash into the box, and every day the ranger comes by and picks it up. Works fairly well. Normally, people who are going out to the national parks and forests aren't the type of folks looking to, you know, break into a strong box for 15, 20 bucks. But one of the perks of this is that you get a cabin on the land that you're looking out for. Phone, cable, internet. Don't have to pay rent. That's included in your job. You don't make a lot of money, but you do get a weekly stipend, or I don't even know if it's an outright paycheck. But for free room and board, living in the woods with a nice relaxing job, I think that sounds pretty nice. And the places where Dimitri, Murph, and I used to go camping out in GW Forest weren't that far from a city called Winchester, which was about, 45, 50 miles west of the edge of the DC Metroplex. Go through some nice country getting out there. A lot of big sprawling ranches and estates. Old money in that part of Virginia. Talking like 300, 400-year-old money. And once you get out to Winchester, Winchester's a decent-sized city. 45, 50, 60,000 people, somewhere around there. And the forests are, 20 minutes out of it. Right on the border between Virginia and West Virginia. It's a beautiful country. Right there on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains, leading down into the Shenandoah Valley. Shenandoah is one of the better wine countries on the East Coast. I know every year they do tours through the wineries, through the vineyards. One of those things that I always wanted to do. I don't particularly care for wine, but things like that, industries like that, wine making, whiskey making, cheese making, fascinate me. Mainly because a lot of those industries are thousands of years old. Like beer. I mean, we've discovered now that the people who built the pyramids, the men and women who worked on them, weren't slaves. This was thought for the longest time. It was actually a highly prestigious position. And the workers were paid in food and beer. And I remember reading about how in one of the tombs there, they had found a strain of old grain of some kind that has since been interbred and created a modern strain. So this was kind of an ancestral strain of like modern wheat or something like that. But it was the same kind of stuff that the Egyptians had used to brew their beer. And some enterprising individuals in Jordan, I think, decided that they would grow this, and they did. And using a recipe gleaned from a tomb, one of the pyramids, one of the many, many scrolls found from ancient Egypt, they recreated 3,500-year-old Egyptian beer using the actual materials that the Egyptians used. Which I think is amazing. Coming up a rather steep hill. This is a good, I don't know, 20-degree grade, which you don't really notice it going down it, but coming up it with the sun on the back of your neck, you do start to feel it. Whew. Plus, it didn't help that I was talking most of the way up. Village store again, and the post office. But yeah, those kinds of, I guess you'd call it reconstructive history, I find fascinating. It's like, given my own area of interest, the Vikings, there are tales of something called a sunstone, which would let navigators spot the sun on cloudy days. They would hold it up to the sky, and when their hand passed over where the sun was hidden behind the clouds, the sunstone would glow, hence the name. And using this, and knowing what time of day it was, this let them navigate. Well, for the longest time, we thought sunstones were myth, until we started finding these clear little spheres in burials, spoils heaps, ruins. I think they may even found one at Lanson-Meadow, the Viking settlement on the coast of Newfoundland. But what they are, it's a type of quartz crystal that somehow manages to refract light in such a way that when you hold it up, if light from the sun, no matter how weak, passes through it, it causes that light to be angled and causes the stone to appear to glow. So, holding this little sunstone up, you'd be able to find where the sun is on a cloudy day. All thanks to the light refractivity of this particular quartz, which I think was just the neatest thing. We also know that initially the Vikings traded to the Arabs for burning lenses, because the Arabs for 1,000 years or more have been phenomenal glass makers, and they discovered the properties of lenses a long time ago. Well, one of the qualities, of course, is that you can use them to start a fire by concentrating and magnifying the light of the sun. And This idea, with the Vikings being very eminently practical people, traded for these. But either because there wasn't large quantities of good quality sand, or just because they were better at working stone and crystal than they were at working glass, they found a way to take clear quartz and grind them into lenses. And so you see like authentic glass burning crystals, burning lenses, where the wealthy Norse were, but commoners were also able to get locally produced quartz lenses that serve the same function. And women especially, hanging from their belt, would have a variety of tools. Burning lens was one. Nail clippers, scissors, ear picks, nail cleaners, nail files. It was one of those things where it was almost like a status symbol how many things a woman had hanging from her belt or from a chain around her neck, depending on the exact point in time and where it was. Because there's a surprising amount of Norse and their descendants. I mean, you've got the Frisians, the Jutes from Jutland. They were originally Norse. The Angles and the Saxons in Britain are both Scandinavian tribes. And then, of course, you got the Danes who invaded Britain in 1066 or earlier. It's ironic that the Vikings had let me rephrase that. The Danish Vikings had just conquered England in 1066. The very same year that William the Conqueror of Normandy, himself a descendant of Vikings, that had spread south through Europe into northern France, also invaded and beat him. So you might say that between the Danes and the Normans, in 1066, England was conquered twice by Vikings, which I find ironic and hilarious at the same time. The Danes were centered around York, and the Danelaw for the longest time. I think it took them several decades to complete their conquest of England, which is what allowed the Normans to reconquer it so easily, because the Danes had just spent all that time pacifying Britain, Saxon, and Anglo resistance. And then when the Normans came in and beat Harold Bluetooth? I can't remember who the leader of the Danes was. At the Battle of Hastings, then it was allowed the Normans to take over and set up the beginnings of what we know as modern Britain today. Well, modern England, at least. And I find it fascinating that the actual Britons, the people that the Romans spoke of and dealt with in Britannia, from Londinium and other Roman holds in Britain, they got pushed back by the Angles and the Saxons, so that now the people who are actually descended of actual Britons are only left in Wales and the Isle of Man. That's it. Everybody else is of Jute, Frisian, Dane, Saxon, and Angle mix, which is why the term Anglo-Saxon isn't really correct, because the Angles and the Saxons were different peoples. Also, the Angles were predominantly Christian during the Britain-Walda era, whereas the Saxons were still pagan. carrying with them their version of the Norse gods. Well, that is about it, because we are home. And I'm not sure how much I've got left on my memory card here, so. And it's going to take a while to upload it to YouTube. So I'm going to cut this short and see what I can see. Maybe get some lunch, because I'm hungry. And maybe tomorrow I'll take you around the other side of Worcester, if you're still interested. For now, though, this is me signing off. And just so you know, still smiling.